I could hear footsteps coming towards the closet door. I pretend to be asleep. That's a trick I learned long ago. You see, if I pretend to be asleep, he'll leave me alone. I heard a door open slowly, and it quickly slammed shut. He must have heard me move because the door quickly swung towards me. And at first, he missed me. But then, he had me in a corner. There was no escaping this time. Not this time. Sadly, the abuse rate of people by their partners is dramatically getting higher and higher. In this story, I'll Always Know Where You Are, by Mariah Olson, a young girl is abused by her partner, Zach, and one day, she finally escapes the horror of abuse. Sometimes, when I was little, my father and I played hide and seek. I had caught in the closet every time, and he acted like he couldn't find me. I could always hear him walk back and forth in front of the closet door, calling out my name like he didn't already know where I was. The smell from the freshly washed winter jackets flooded the closet. He'd act surprised when he opened the closet door and found me crouched on the floor, covered in winter jackets, giggling to myself. "There you are," he'd say with a big old jolly grin on his face. "Here I am, Daddy. Daddy, how can you always find me?" "I always know where you are." And then he'd reach out his rough but kind hand and pull me out from my hiding spot. I started dating Zach when I was 17. You know how they say there's someone out there for everyone? Well, Zach was my someone. From his bright blue eyes, his intoxicating charm, he was the guy any girl would be lucky to have. Not to mention, he was the star quarterback for my high school football team. Nothing could beat the feeling of wearing his jersey on Friday nights, and every weekend we go to whatever party was happening. He was the life of the party. We'd walk in together, both smiling, his arm around me. I couldn't imagine being anyone else's but his. Zach took me to all these places that I never would have gone if it wasn't for him. One time, Zach even skipped football practice to take me to the county fair. He tried for hours and hours trying to win me this big stuffed teddy bear, but instead of winning it, he finally just paid off the carny so that I could walk around holding the prize he'd gotten just for me. Gosh, I was so proud. Though carrying that bear around the fair was great, I felt so lucky because I knew what kind of guy Zach was, even when no one was watching. Zach was the best. From listening to me complain about girls at school, to helping me cram for that test that I should have been studying for all week. But most of all, Zach was the only one there for me when my dad died. I started to distance myself from my friends and my loved ones, afraid that they would leave me just like my father did. Zach was honestly the only thing keeping me sane. But then, he started to go to more and more parties, but this time without me. There was no arm around my shoulder, just me sitting at home waiting for someone who may never show up. And that's where my love story turns around. Zach always told me these stories about how his father wasn't good to his mother and how his mother deserved better. He told me these stories about how he'd come home to his drunken father with his hands around his mother's neck and he'd have to pry him off of her. He'd often come to school with cuts and bruises all over his body. But he always said how worth it was. He'd tell me these stories, and every time they end up the same way with the "I'm never gonna turn into my father" speech. And then the next thing he knew, he was turning into the exact man he did not want to be. When he would drink, he would start to take all of his anger out on me by hurting me. And he would come home at all hours of the night expecting me to take care of him. And at the beginning, I took very good care of him. But soon, I wasn't enough. And of course, he'd feel terrible about it. He always did. He'd apologize and apologize. And I forgave him many more times than I should have. My father always told me I deserved better than Zach. Being a father of an only daughter, I thought he was just being overprotective. I knew that he was bad news. It seemed seemed like the good times outweighed the bad times. I couldn't just throw away all of our past. I couldn't just act like he had made me the happiest girl in the world. Besides, I couldn't leave Zach the way that my mother left me. I knew what it was like to be left behind. I didn't want anyone to ever feel like that. But now, I'm the one being left behind. He was such a good guy before all of this, but I had confidence that I could turn him back into that man that won me that big teddy bear. But now, as I sit here in the closet with blood dripping down my face, I realize that I was wrong. I couldn't change him back. And I know what you're thinking. Why am I still with him, right? The thing is, he didn't let me leave. He did things like lock me in the closet to prevent me from leaving. And if I tried to leave, the consequences would be much worse than if I would have just stayed. I wasn't prepared for what could happen to me if I tried to escape. Besides, where was I going to escape to anyway? My mother left my father when I was 2. My father always told me that she just needed space and that the life she was living wasn't good for her. You could tell by the way he talked about her that he still loved her. But none of that matters now, does it? My father passed away 7 years ago after a long battle with cancer. My father was the most courageous and brave person I knew. My father is buried in the ground, but I need him to come rescue me. I need him to come open up this closet door and allow me to escape from this mess. But he couldn't. He couldn't rescue me this time. The strong smell of whiskey was determined to stay on his breath as Zach whispered into my ear things I did not want to hear. "No, leave me alone!" And then he grasped my arm so tightly I could feel the bruises forming in the shape of fingerprints as he pulled me across the floor and he threw me in the closet. "It's staying there! That way I'll always know where you are!" And that's where I spent my night. In the locked closet. I remember thinking, maybe it's better this way. This way he can't hurt me. And I kept telling myself that. He can't hurt me. He can't hurt me. He can't hurt me. After the beating, he left me in the closet for days. On the first day, my forehead would not stop bleeding. I tore off a small piece of an old winter jacket to press against the gash in my forehead. I tore off another larger piece of the same jacket to wrap around my forearm where the baseball bat took a second hit. But the blood went through the piece of jacket in minutes. Not only was blood present almost everywhere in the closet, but I was forced to go to the bathroom in the closet because there was no way of getting myself to the toilet. On the second day, I could tell it was a new day because I saw the light shine through the crack on the closet door. My stomach was growling. I started to grow hungrier and hungrier. And on the third day, I started to fade. I could no longer feel the blood against my bruised face. And the smell from the musty winter jackets was disappearing along with the light shining through the crack on the closet door. I could barely hear someone pacing outside the closet door, and so I braced myself. But then, the closet door opened, and I squinted my eyes through the bright light. It was my father. "There you are," he'd say with a big old jolly grin on his face. "Here I am, Daddy. Here I am."